And there's the sound. Woo. Ah, all right. Oh, sorry about the lateness. Sorry, sorry, sorry. I know it seems like I've been going live for like 47 minutes, but I had to actually get everything uploaded on this Riverside app. Very interesting app. For those of you that don't have it, you should download it. Very interesting app. So, welcome everybody. Welcome to the live of the Melanated Hospice Nurse. Let's talk about it Thursdays. And I am so incredibly grateful and honored to be a part of this space. And I say that because this space, the Melanated Hospice space, belongs to the entire community. And I say that with love and honor and dignity and respect. So let's just explain a little bit about what's happening right now. So let's talk about it Thursdays is where I go live in order to discuss the topic of the week when it comes to the podcast. This way, this gives us an opportunity to engage with each other. You all can watch the podcast, watch it again, let it sit, let it marinate, as we say. And then what questions you have, you bring those questions to this space, and we try to answer those questions as open and as honestly as possible. If I do not know the answer to your question, trust me, I'm going to find out. So I wanted to create a space where we can actually interact and engage when it comes to the topics that we talk about on the podcast. So the way the podcast is structured is we have an umbrella topic for the month. And then underneath, we have four main topics that we talk about once a week and cover those topics. And then we go live on Thursdays to actually engage and interact about that specific topic. I felt that this was something that was very well needed because a lot of the times podcasts can just be one direction where people are just giving information, but there's no ability to interact to where people can ask questions and actually say, okay, well, what about this and what about that? And I've had this experience. So let's talk about it Thursdays is a space where you all can come and ask those very tough questions. And I try my best to try to answer those. Now, of course, will I answer all the questions? Probably not. Will I try to? Absolutely. But like they say in church, I'm not going to hold you long because I know that people have other things to do. But I am looking forward to this space. I'm looking forward to interactions. I'm looking forward to the engagements. I'm looking forward to being able to hear from community, to learn from community when it comes to all the experiences that you all are going through, when it comes to end of life care, when it comes to death and dying, when it comes to hospice space, what that feels like, what that means, what it means to you, what it means to your family. So that's what Let's Talk About It Thursday space is all about. It's literally for you all. It's for community to have an open engagement opportunity to be able to interact and ask those very, very tough questions. So, with that being said, just to give a little bit of recap of the very first Melanated Hospice Nurse podcast that was aired on Sunday. It's now on Spotify, YouTube, Spotify, and one more, Riverside. I know that. Yeah. So those are the platforms that the podcast is on. And you can also find those links on the link tree, the Melanated Hospice Nurse link tree. And you can be able to access all of those social media pages to be able to see the podcast, to see the lives, to interact, the website, all those beautiful spaces. But my ultimate goal is to hope that you all had an opportunity to actually listen, watch, share, engage when it comes to the actual podcast that was aired on Sunday. So, of course, you can go and access it now if you need to, or when this is over, and you can still ask questions. It is not because if that podcast were onto something else that you can't ask questions about podcast number one. So the original podcast is what this not the original podcast, but week one was what hospice actually is. What is hospice? What is it? What does all of that mean? Because the main topic for the month is what is hospice space when it comes to our community? What does that mean? What does that feel like? When you hear that word, allow it to kind of resonate a little bit So what's pulling forward are all the emotions and knowledge that's attached to the word hospice. And that's where I want to engage with. I want to be able to really go to that space and really talk about what that feels like when you hear the word hospice. How does that affect you? How does that affect your family? How does that affect the loved one that was possibly on hospice? What were your interactions with hospice if you've had a loved one on hospice before? What was that space like? So this week in the podcast, we really focused on what hospice actually is. And underneath that topic, we were able to really focus on four subtopics. One of them was, what's the difference between treatment versus comfort care? Because when it comes to hospice, that's the difference versus being in an acute setting where you get treatment. In hospice, you get comfort care. So that's a real tough question for a lot of people because we live in a medical space where a lot of those spaces are intertwined and the care modules are intertwined. So we kind of put hospice in an acute care setting when it comes to a person that's actually possibly in the last phases of their life in that end of life journey. And we have them in these acute settings. And now we're trying to treat the dying process instead of allowing it to happen naturally. So that was one topic that we discussed. And then another topic that we discussed was the misunderstanding of hospice and where it comes from. Where is this coming from? This whole misunderstanding of hospice when it comes to not understanding exactly what it means and why do we feel that way? Why do we feel that way? So that was another topic that we discussed as well when it comes to hospice care. Why the misunderstanding? What's the purpose of hospice? What's the purpose? Why would we even want hospice to come into our spaces? What's the purpose of hospice? We were able to answer those questions as well too on the podcast. How hospice got started, how it got integrated into the United States, how it got integrated into the medical module, how it got integrated into communities. What is the purpose of hospice? And how that impacts our community. So when you go back and listen to the podcast, you'll be able to actually hear these questions being answered. And we've had some really amazing interactions when it comes to that. We've had people ask some very interesting questions when it comes to what hospice means to them. For some people, it meant a death sentence. That's what they understood about hospice. When hospice comes into our community or into our space or into my life, that means that death is near. I'm doomed for death. They're going to help me die. I'm going to die, or they're going to make you die. I've heard that as well, too. And those are very valid feelings. And for some people, those are very valid experiences because you never want to negate somebody's experience when it comes to the end of life space and the end of life dying process. So I had one person ask me, they unfortunately had a pretty bad experience with hospice because it does happen because we're all human. And they asked, how is it that I recover my trust when it comes to having hospice come back into my space again? Knowing what I went through with them the first time, a lot of miscommunication, a lot of assumption, a lot of condescending interaction, where the person or the organization comes in and they just take over and they don't engage with the families. They don't communicate with the families. They just take over that space. So, how do I recover with that? How do I go back to trusting having hospice come back into my space if I've had a very bad experience with them? And that's a very tough question to answer because the only thing you could do would be to allow them to come back into the space. But the way you do it is to make sure that this time you actually sit down and you interview them. Because what happens is when a person gets placed on hospice, it usually takes place through a doctor's order. A doctor comes in, They tell the family, hey, listen, I think your loved one is near the end of their journey. They possibly have less than 6 months to a year to live. We tried all the treatments that we could possibly try, and I think it's now time to call in hospice. So hospice comes in, we do our thing, we admit the patient, but we come in with this feeling or this approach that we're the expert when it comes to the dying journey. We may have a lot of interactions when it comes to the dying journey, but how can I be an expert on your loved one who's never died before? How can I be that expert? Because every death journey is individual. And I say this all the time, and you're going to hear me say this a lot. Just like there's only one thumbprint in this world that's mine, nobody else in this world has my thumbprint. We can apply that same principle and that same fact to the dying process. If I am as individual as my thumbprint, then therefore my dying process is going to be as individual as that. Nobody's going to die like me. Yes, we may have a lot of similarities when it comes to the dying process, but nobody is going to have that journey like I'm going to have that journey. Nobody's going to have my journey but me. So, how can I come in and be the expert on your journey? I can't. What I can do is I can come in humbly as a part of the team, with you being the center or your family member being the center of the team. And what we're doing is making sure that the center of the team gets exactly what they want and what they need to die with dignity, to die free of pain, to die with their legacy intact. That's all I can do. I can't come in as the expert on that person's journey. So, what I would challenge people to do is there are multiple hospices now, especially in the county that we live in, multiple hospices. I would literally sit down and interview one or two or three of the hospices. I would start with the team leader. Soon as the doctor puts that order in and the admissions nurse calls you and says, hey, listen, we got an order for your loved one to be admitted to hospice. I would then ask them, is there someone like a liaison that can come out and speak with my family so I can find out exactly what services you all have to offer and what is your approach when it comes to taking care of my loved one? Is it going to be a takeover approach where you all come in and you take over the care with very little to no communication? Or is it going to be a collaborative approach where my loved one gets to be the center of this care and everything else is dictated from that? And those would be the questions that I would ask. So if you've had a bad experience with hospice or any type of end of life care organization, but I'm going to say hospice because that's what's familiar to all of us, I would highly recommend that you sit down and you talk to more than one hospice, because for a lot of us, we think that all hospices are the same. We literally think, oh, well, hospice, that's all the same. Literally, hospices are different from county to county. The hospice that I work in, we're now expanding to multiple counties. But when I first started working here, we were only in one county because there were hospices in other counties. Hospices in California are completely different than hospices in New York, because anybody can open a hospice, anybody can start a hospice care organization. So all hospices are not the same. They have standard guidelines that they have to abide by, but they're not the same. The services that they offer are not the same. I would ask them, what services do you offer? In-home bathing care, volunteer services, respite care, pet therapy, aromatherapy, music therapy. What services do you offer? How often does your nurse come in to visit? Do you all have a home health aide that comes in to help my loved one with any type of bathing needs or any type of personal care? Do you have chaplain services? Do you do outings? Do you do alternative healing therapies, sound bowls, meditations, aromatherapies? I would ask those questions And then, literally, from what you've heard and what you felt when that person came into your home, I would then make that decision moving forward. But then I would let them know that you do all have to understand that my loved one is driving this. I know you all have all the knowledge when it comes to end of life, but the expert that's experiencing the journey is lying in that bed. And we're going to make sure that the care is tailored to that. So that's one way that you can try to regain your trust when it comes to hospice care. Another way to try to regain the trust when it comes to hospice care is literally talking to other people. I mean, you will find out people in the grocery store, someone that you know has had an experience with hospice. And a lot of the times we can use that referral system. Social media is a great place. Has anyone had an experience with hospice in our community? And if you have, can you please tell me which hospice it was and what was your experience? You definitely want to start opening up and networking when it comes to that. And the reason why these questions are so important is because when it comes to this end of life journey, and I live by this model when it comes to me caring for my patients, I tell my families this all the time: there is no do over. This is not a rehearsal. I don't get a chance to do this again. So when it comes to me taking care of your loved one, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure we get it right the first time, because I don't get a second chance to do this again. And when I say I mean I as a nurse. I don't get an opportunity to do this again. So I'm going to make sure that I do everything in my power to get it right the first time. Yes, it's a human experience, so we're going to have things that we can always do better. But that's really not what you want to hear when your loved one passes. Is that, well, the nurse she had a bad experience. She was having a hard time. And how does that make me feel better? Because I only get one shot to do this dying journey once with my loved one, or even with myself, if it's an individual who's advocating for themselves. So I stand by that. I stand on that. I get one shot to do it right. And I would do everything in my power to make sure that this person not only has the best experience, but that they experience the best experience. Because I believe that everyone has the right to enjoy their dying journey. It should be as beautiful to them as what we hope it to be. They should be able to experience the love and the peace not only surrounding them, but what they're entering into. Everyone should have the opportunity to have a beautiful death. That's the term that we use in hospice when a person transitions, and everything about their death was beautiful. The sad part is, beautiful deaths, unfortunately, are the exception and not the rule. A lot of us are dying in spaces that are not peaceful, they're not free of pain, they're lonely, they're depressing, and that is a lot of people's reality. And I may be sounding almost unrealistic when I say my goal is to flip that to where the beautiful experience is the rule, not the exception. So, those were some of the questions that were really coming forward from this last podcast. People were having not so good experiences with hospice, and I can understand. I've been doing hospice now for 20, almost 21 years. I've been a nurse for 30. And I've been in some spaces where I wouldn't want that for my loved one. I would only want the best for them. And I constantly put myself in the patient's shoes. Now, can I do that totally? No, I can't, because it's their journey. But I often think about, and how patients help me is, I often think about my death a lot. Yes, I'm the one at the party talking about death all the time. That's just what I do. And I love discussing it because I truly believe that the focus of death for me allows me to live a more peaceful life now. I kind of live my life backwards. I live my life from my death to where I am now because what I'm realizing is at my time of death for me, I want very little to no regrets. Well, in order for that to happen, I have to live now with no regrets. So it kind of keeps me in a balanced space. And I'm working on it. Trust me. I am under construction when it comes to that. But the death experience allows me to live a beautiful experience. So that was one of the main questions that was coming through was I had a pretty bad experience with hospice in the past. How do I regain my trust for them, especially in melanated communities? Because we don't have a lot of trust in the medical system anyway. And that's just encoded in our diasporic DNA. We don't have a lot of trust in the medical system, especially when it comes to the dying process. We don't. We just don't. So I'm praying that whatever interactions that I have within our community that is positive enough where not even if you don't really have to even trust hospice, but just trust that the dying process should be a beautiful journey because we really don't have a great connection with death emotionally, physically, psychologically. We don't have a good connection with death. We really don't have the emotional capacity to really fully understand it because we don't live in a culture that celebrates it. And when I mean death, I'm really focusing on the dying process. The dying process. And like I said in my podcast, the death part we got down to a science when it comes to celebrating that. It's the dying process. And now trying to get that celebration to extend into the dying process all the way up to the death, as opposed to waiting and then celebrating the actual death. Because there's so much beauty in it. So much beauty in it. I had a patient today that transitioned today. Oh my goodness. Oh man. She was she was special. I think all of my patients are special. And I say that after every death. And she transitioned today and she didn't labor for long. She didn't labor for long. I saw her on Tuesday, and as soon as I walked in the room I knew that the transitioning was happened. I called her family members and said, hey, listen, um, I think it's time. I think it's time for us to come together and have this conversation because it appears as if she's now entering into her final phase. Her beautiful butterfly transitioning phase is what I call it. And the family members were right on board. They were very realistic about that. They felt like, yes, we saw it when we came and saw her on Sunday. We felt that the time has come. So unfortunately, she had some pain because she had a stroke in the past. And she had a lot of right-sided weakness and deficits from the stroke. So now she was having some pain. She was only down to 74 pounds. Bless her sweetheart. So I knew that it probably would not take a lot of pain medicine to get her comfortable. So we started the morphine, and we're going to have a whole topic on morphine and what that means because I know when people hear that, they're like, oh my God, that's the drug of death. That causes death. I got you. So we started the morphine because she no longer had the ability to swallow, but we still had to make sure that she was getting comfortably medicated with pain medicine. So she literally started the morphine that night, and she ended up laboring for about 24, 48 hours. And I got the call this morning at 9:14 that she had transitioned and she had finally taken her wings. And I called the family and they were on board. They could not come and spend time with her because another loved one was sick and can't make that can't make the move to come and see her. I said, I got it. I got her. Don't you worry. Went to the building, and the aides that were taking care of her, they were crying because they loved her. And so we offered them all the support we can offer them because that was family as well too. But when I walked in, the television had the news playing, of course. So I asked one of the aides, I said, do me a favor. I said, please turn it on to some beautiful soft sounds. Yes, we know she had already transitioned, but the presence of who she was, her body was still there. So I wanted to make sure to respect that space and make it as peaceful as possible because she journeyed, I mean, she labored to get there. She wasn't in a lot of pain. We did see a lot of discomfort, but we know that, it was time her body couldn't hold her anymore. All the aspects of who she was, every layer of who she was had come to a pinnacle, and her body just couldn't hold it. All that beautifulness and magic of who she was, her body couldn't hold it. So the body released it. So we opened up the blinds. We turned the music on to the TV on to soft music, made sure she was clean, she was comfortable. I understand that she's transitioned, but this is still who she is. And one of the other aides had come in and she was crying. And so we hugged and we talked about, how they did such an amazing job caring for her, and how they stood in the place for the family that could not be there but wanted to be there. So, and that was a beautiful experience. That part was beautiful. Being able to really have to where she wasn't struggling and she wasn't in pain and it wasn't a lot of discomfort, but even after the soul left the body, the presence and the essence of who she was still in the room. So we still wanted to make sure that that space was beautiful and that it was peaceful and that it was quiet and that it represented who she was. And the family was so grateful for that. So that's the goal, even if it takes place immediately after the dying process. We can still make sure that the legacy of who she is and who she was still represented and honored. I was so thankful that it occurred that way because yes, she is in a facility, and a lot of the times that's a space that's hard to die in. And we don't have a whole conversation when it comes to that because I go into homes, I go into facilities, I go to wherever your address is. I've had patients in homeless shelters, you name it. If that's your home, that's where I'm going to make sure that you have the best possible experience. So her family was so grateful because they could not be there. But we made sure that we were on the phone with them step by step, letting them know what we were doing, turning the TV off, turning it to soft sounds, all of those things, just so they knew that the love that they had for her extended beyond just them. And the place where she was continuing that love that they had for her. And what a way to be honored. What a way to be honored. So I did say I wasn't gonna hold you long. Y'all have to tap me on my shoulder, pull my coattail like they do at church, because I will talk to y'all all night. And I know it's getting late. So this week's podcast talked about what hospice means in our community. Next week, we're gonna talk about fear of death and the dying process and where that comes from, especially in the melanated communities. Ooh, it's gonna be a good one, y'all. It's gonna be a good one. That's what we're gonna talk about next week. So Sunday, I'll be back on live on Sunday for Soulful Sundays. And Soulful Sundays is where I'm going to give a little snippet of the podcast that's dropping that day. So every week is a podcast. Every Sunday, I'll go live on Soulful Sundays with the Melanated Hospice Nurse, and I'll be able to drop a little bit of a snippet of what we're going to discuss in that week's podcast. And then come back and see you guys again on Thursday for Let's Talk About It Thursdays. Bring your questions. Bring your questions. Because with this app, Riverside, I love it. I'm actually able to stream live on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, Facebook. Love it. Love it. Different spaces all at the same time. So, Sunday, I will see you all at 6 o'clock for live, talking about Soulful Sundays and what we're going to talk about on the live for the whole week. I'm sorry, for the podcast for the week. And then we'll meet back here again on Thursdays for Let's Talk About It Thursdays, where you're going to bring your questions and we're going to answer them to the best of our ability. But keep watching the podcast. I want you to share. I want you to have conversations with your family. I want you to talk to your neighbors because eventually we're going to have these conversations in person. We're going to go into community. The melanated hospice nurse will be in community and we're going to have cafe opportunities to where you can just come and ask these questions. I'll be set up in different places around the community. Y'all come in, bring your questions, bring your family, bring your loved one, and we can have these conversations because that's where we're going to get back to honoring our loved one as they're dying, like we used to, by having conversations, by being present in community, by leaning on one another, by trusting one another. So I'm so excited about that when we actually take these lives live. So thank y'all for coming on tonight. Thank you for joining me. I'm still working out all these beautiful kinks when it comes to all of this social media stuff, but I think tonight, I think we did okay. Alexis Crawford manages the social media and she is phenomenal. Thank you guys. I pray that you have an amazing night, a wonderful week. We'll meet back here again on Sunday for Soulful Sundays, where a new podcast is dropping for the week. But until then, I need you to remember, may compassion guide you and may culture ground you. Until we meet again, peace and blessings. Have a good night.